I have a confession to make. I don't like conflict. In fact, if I'm to be completely honest with you, I'm afraid of conflict. But this fear hasn't served me well. I've gone through my life telling myself I can't make decisions for fear that I'll get it wrong. Not good for someone who's been in leadership positions, meant to be guiding teams and projects. I've also gone through life avoiding fully expressing myself for fear that someone will disagree with me or dislike me for it. Not a good thing for someone whose role is to help others express themselves fully. And I hate to admit it, but I've also gone through life making compromise choices and sometimes forcing my way onto others, insisting that they compromise for me. Definitely not a good thing for someone who strives to be in loving, empowered, authentic relationships. So a few years ago, I decided to do something about it. I wanted to get to the bottom of conflict. What is it really? How do we engage with conflict? How do we act in conflict? What happens? Why? And the thing I really wanted to know, was there a way out of it? And I had the tools to do this, with a background in psychology, with 2 decades of experience managing teams and organizations in situations of real conflict. But it wasn't until I started working with people closely, one-to-one, in couples, in teams, to really get to the bottom of the conflict that they were in, that some answers started to emerge. And the first answer was really simple. Conflict is an existence of differences. It's an existence of variance. And this, by the way, is neither good or bad. It's actually quite common and it's quite natural in nature, in life. But it's our experience of conflict, it's how we experience conflict that shapes what happens next. And one of the ways that we experience conflict is as internal conflict, confusion. And the other way that we experience conflict is externally, in a confrontation with others. Now, the thing that conflict does is put us in a state of increased tension because something else has now come into the mix, which risks life as we knew it, which could jeopardize our stability, which might mean that something could go wrong outside of our control now. So there's a tendency in us to want to resolve this conflict, to be done with it. And when faced with internal conflict, confusion, interestingly enough, one of the strategies we employ is to stay in the confusion, to stay in a dilemma, tell ourselves, we don't have the answers, we can't make a decision, we can't make a choice, to avoid getting it wrong. But on the flip side, we might also deal with conflict by rushing into a decision, telling ourselves, no, this is the way, this is the only way, to the exclusion of other possibilities. Once again, because if we don't have to worry about the other possibilities, we don't have to worry about getting it wrong. And then sometimes we deny that there are even any possibilities. We tell ourselves, I don't have a choice. There's nothing I can do. But resolving conflict in these ways leaves us feeling stuck, not able to move forward in life, or settling for something that's okay, but wasn't really what we wanted. Or worse, feeling sad, perhaps in despair at the way things are. And what about external conflict? One of the ways in which we deal with confrontation, quite commonly, is by exerting ourselves, by aggressing towards the other. Because if I can show such force, if I can become the most powerful, the most forceful authority in the room, well, hey, you don't stand a chance. So conflict doesn't threaten me as much. But of course, what happens when we do this? We end up disconnected to other people. But that's not the only way that we deal with confrontation, because on the flip side, we might actually make it about appeasing others. Oh, it isn't about me. Let me make it about you. Let me appease you. Let me be as non-threatening as I possibly can, so that I'm not a danger to you, and therefore you won't threaten me. Great way out of conflict. But of course, we don't live life as an expression of our authentic selves when we do this. But hey, there's yet another way that we take to resolve conflict. And that is to avoid putting ourselves in any situation which might bring up any form of conflict for us. Let's avoid it altogether. But of course, we end up living an unfulfilled life as a result. So the thing that started to become obvious is all of these ways of dealing with conflict weren't actually getting us to what we would love in life. Sure, they were short-term strategies. They helped us feel better when we were faced with conflict, but it wasn't leading to joy. It wasn't leading to fulfillment. So what was driving this behavior? And one of the things that struck me, that emerged, that was such a powerful thing to see, was across all of the situations we looked at and all of the people that I engaged with, there was one thing at the root of our experience and our response to conflict. And that was fear. Our basic human fears. Now, conflict is a threatening situation because there are external forces at play. We have no guarantees anymore. So what have we got to do? The fear comes up and starts talking to us. And this is real, by the way. One of the things the fear says to us is, I'm not safe. I won't be safe. So what have I got to do? I've got to look for guarantees. I've got to have control. I should definitely not go down any path or explore any solutions that don't offer me a guarantee. A guarantee is what I need to ensure my safety. And another way that the fear speaks to us is saying, I need to protect myself, my identity, my sense of self. Because if things go really wrong, could I lose myself? Could I lose who I am? And our identity is anything we associate with. It's anything we affiliate with. And anything that seems to challenge that, even if it's a challenge to our opinions, we can experience as threatening. So what have we got to do? We've got to defend. But of course, as soon as we get into defense, we're already in one half of the dynamic of conflict. And then the third way that fear speaks to us is to say, I won't be validated by others. I won't be seen the way I want to be seen. Human beings have evolved as social creatures. We like to know where we stand in society. We like to know who we are with relation to others. And we like for others to see us in a certain way. So this fear comes up and says to us, if I do this, or if I don't do this, will they still see me as good? Will they see me as lovable? Will they see me as smart? Or will they see me as powerful? Will they still see me as strong? Will they see me as capable? So what we end up doing is actually giving our power away. We give the power away to what we think someone else wants to see, for us to be seen in a certain way. And by the way, we give this power away even to strangers, even to people we don't know. If you've ever posted on social media you might have an idea of what I'm talking about. We put the power in what we think we need to get back from others to be validated in who we are. I received an email recently from someone that really upset me. I was helping out a team on a project, and I was giving my own time and my resources to do this for them. And the email I got back said, well, that's great, but can you do it this way? Can you do it this way? Can you do it this way? And by the way, can you give us some money too? And that made me really angry. It's like, what? I'm doing all this for you, and now you want my money too? So in the spirit of honesty with you, I fumed for a moment, maybe two. And then I sat back and asked myself, what's really going on for me? It's just an email. Why am I so triggered? What am I really afraid of here? And it turned out that all of those fears were coming into play for me. Because I felt if they're asking me for more, that means they're not valuing me for what I'm giving. So does that mean I'm not valuable to them? I'm not valuable enough. Oh, and by the way, they're asking me for money now. And if I say no, does that mess with my identity as a good person? How dare they put me in this situation? And by the way, if I give everything I have to give, where does it stop? Will I have anything left for me? What about my security? What about my safety in life? So I typed out a response. But luckily, I didn't do it in the email. I did it in my notes, because we know how these things can happen. You accidentally hit the send button, and there it is. So I typed out a response. I also put down everything that was coming up for me very honestly here. And then I went back and read the email that they'd sent me. And turns out, they weren't demanding anything at all. They were simply expressing their needs based on the situation they were operating from. And at the end, they even said very clearly, by the way, none of this is compulsory. Having looked at it, after going back and looking at my own fears, made me see things I didn't see on the first reading. So I was looking for a way out of conflict. That's how my journey started. And I found it. But it wasn't the path, the answer that I was expecting. Because what I found is that in order to go beyond conflict, we first have to go deeper. We have to go deeper into ourselves and look at the pain that's really coming up for us. What is the situation of conflict bringing up for us? What is it saying to us? What are we fearing? What are we feeling? We've got to go within first. And we've got to be able to accept ourselves with all of those fears and all of our faults, and be okay with also feeling that fear, with also being in this pain of what this conflict conjures up for us. And it's only once we hold this compassion for ourselves that we're actually able to go back up externally and look at things more compassionately with others in mind. The one thing I realized is there isn't a shortcut. You can't go back from that experience of conflict to compassion for others, understanding for others. It'll only ever be very surface level if we don't first go deeper and look at our own fears. But what happens after the state of compassion? A love of something shared that we can create together. And by the way, that's what we ended up doing. I ended up having a conversation with that person, not sending them the email, and the impact we had from the project subsequently was far greater than we'd ever imagined. And we also ended up being in a longer-term partnership with both of us really happy about that. So coming from this state of love allows us to create something greater. And that something greater I call confluence. Now, confluence is an act, a process of merging together. Think of two rivers that come together to flow into, to create the mighty rivers of the world. That's confluence. Each one of us today, each one of us here, exist because of confluence. One thing, very different from another thing, came together, merged, fused, and grew into something bigger and beautiful. Life is created through confluence. So what could we create from a state of confluence? And people often tell me they admire my relationship with my husband. We have a loving relationship. We're open and honest with each other. We support each other in being our best and growing into our better and better selves in the world every day and every year. It brings us a lot of joy. But it wasn't always that way. We had to openly surface and navigate a lot of conflict and look at what was coming up for each one of us before we were able to create something greater, a marriage in our case. And what if each one of us could do that? Each one of us could look within and create something greater. What would that be? And I have another confession to make. I'm an optimist. I believe that if each one of us can look within and go beyond, we can change the world. Not because the world is an easy thing to change, but because each one of us is on the same shared human journey. And the leaders of organizations are you and I. The leaders of nations, policymakers, military generals are you and I. Parents and teachers and communities are you and I. And conflict will always come up. It'll always be a part of our lives. And there'll be a voice through that conflict, the voice of fear, that'll tell us what path to go down, how to deal with it, how to resolve it. But if we could only choose to see it from a different perspective, what could we create? So the only thing we have to ask ourselves is, what would we love to create? How are our own fears going to come and talk to us? And where do we choose to go from here? Thank you very much.